Hi, welcome back. This is Liz, and I'm joined by a fabulous guest today. I'm just going to give you some information about her. So, Maetreyii-Ma is an award-winning author. She's a clinical psychologist and spiritual teacher who has developed a worldwide following, bringing forth the deep wisdom that manifests to her both through her inner guru, Baba, and in her teacher, the renowned Indian mystic Shrii Shrii Anandamurti Baba. But this is where it gets fascinating. While she met and lived in the ashram of the living guru, Shrii Shrii Anandamurti Baba, in India for 8 months before he passed from this earth, the immortal spiritual consciousness he embodied has been side by side with her since her college years, long before she met him, and it has continued long after he passed over. So I'm so excited to meet you, Maetreyii-Ma, and your story just fascinated me. It jumped out at me, and I was like, yes, I need to talk to you.
Yes. Well, thank you. It's wonderful to be here with you.
Oh, you're welcome. So can you tell us how did this begin? So from the beginning, can you tell us your story?
Wow. My spiritual journey story really started when I was a child with a connection to, I think a lot of us feel a connection to nature, a connection to animals. I love animals, and I lived in a bit of a country setting where I had animals and a lot of nature around me. And so that's really where it began. And when I was I'd say about 11 or 12, I started feeling this spiritual presence around me. And I felt it's interesting because I lived in a suburb of Chicago. And, it was a time when there was no idea of reincarnation or anything like that, or none of these ideas were a part of the culture. But I had this feeling that this divine being, that I'd been with this being before. I felt this divine presence. There was no teaching, no guidance, just a presence. But when I felt it, it was so beautiful. I was immediately completely in love. And that presence really was something that was with me for some years when I was young, and really was formative for me. I fell madly in love, and all I wanted to do was be with this presence that I felt. And I would go for long walks at night. I talk about it in my book, with this guiding presence that I felt. And I kind of saw this whitish figure a little bit, but sort of on a subtle plane, but I didn't have any, inner guidance from it that was verbal. It was
And
all.
did you know who it was then?
No, I didn't know. There was no name given. There was no, I thought, and the only being I'd ever heard of who would be like this being was Jesus, right? That was all I'd ever heard of. And that would be equivalent to the vibration that I felt, and the presence and the love and the holiness. And so I thought maybe it was Jesus, because I didn't know, but I didn't really, there was no information given. And so actually I spent some time crying myself to sleep at night, because I thought, oh, I'm 2,000 years too late. Why did this happen to me?
Oh.
Because I wanted to be with this being, but then from later experience, I think it was the same presence that I've felt guiding my life for many, many years, that came to me in my 20s, which I call Baba. It gave the name to me, Baba, but I didn't know that then. And yeah, I had a feeling that one was my father, and the Mother Nature and all of the universe was my mother. That was my feeling when I was young. But then I, like all teenagers, I got a little older, and I got very involved in the world and in my friends and boyfriends and, that type of thing that teenagers do. And I forgot about that and extroverted my life for some years
Mm-hmm.
until I reached
Happens, yeah.
my 20s. Yeah, yeah. You know, having fun, having friends, having boyfriends, having, you know, the kinds of things that teenagers like.
Mm-hmm.
And and I actually went through a period of searching in churches for this God self that I felt. And I became very disillusioned. And I just kind of, after a while, felt there is no God, you know, that I was very disillusioned with it all.
Mm-hmm.
And I became a beatnik, and then I became a hippie, and, you know, it would like that. So that's how I started out.
Okay. And then, so from that point, you'd been the beatnik, you'd been the hippie, and then what was it? Did you feel, so you felt Baba come back? What was the feeling? What happened that made you sort of get rid of all that disillusion and realize that there was something there?
I started meditation.
Okay.
I had a desire came to meditate. I had been through a period of psychedelics, and I had some very profound mystical experiences with psychedelics. With LSD, I had some very, very deep spiritual experiences. And then I had some very deep disillusion and difficult experiences after that when that door closed.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know how to get back to that sense of divine presence and that sense of unity of all life that I felt on LSD. And I didn't know how to bring that and that divine sense back into my life. And then I read about meditation, and I took a course on Eastern religion at the college that I was at. And that changed my life. I realized that, oh, other people had these types of experiences way back when I was reading the Bhagavad Gita in my course. And it made me realize, oh, these are not just some weird thing that happened on LSD or, you know, this is something that happens to people, and other people feel these same things. They feel there's a unitary whole of being, and that there is a one self and a one love. And I got excited about that, and from this course I was taking, and then I wanted to meditate.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I was going to Southern Illinois University, and it's in the middle of nowhere, and not the kind of place in those days you would find the 60s, late 60s, early, that you would find a meditation teacher. But then I got that feeling. And then the next week, two meditation teachers showed up in town. One was a TM meditation teacher, and the other was this orange robed Swami. They called him Dadaji. And he was a monk of my guru to be, which I didn't relate to the idea of guru at that point. I had no idea. But there was this orange robed monk, and I felt inclined towards him, and he seemed like the real deal, you know. So I learned meditation from him. I got involved in a community of people meditating. There were some ups and downs and all of that, but finally, in my meditation, I had gotten afraid about meditating, so I'd stopped for a while, and then I started again. And the reason I had gotten afraid is because I was having unusual experiences, and I thought, oh, these aren't happening to other people. Something must be wrong with me, you know? So I got a little scared. But then I started meditating, and everything was going smoothly for many months, and nothing weird was happening, and it was all good. And then suddenly I came out of one meditation, and I realized that there was this voice that had been this immensely holy being who had been, or presence that had been talking to me in my meditation, and that I was completely in love. And and that in fact, this being had been talking to me for months in meditation, but I would forget it the moment I came out of meditation. And then one meditation, I just remembered it. I remembered all of the, the whole thing that I'd been forgetting. And if I hadn't been forgetting, I would have quit meditation. But by this time,
Maybe that's why you were forgetting.
yes, I felt it was divine guidance that to cause me to forget, so that, but by the time I remembered it all, I was so in love. I was so attracted to this divine presence that even though I thought, well, this is weird, and I never heard of anybody having inner voices. This is a long time ago now, except crazy people. So I was quite frightened by the idea, but I was also really in love by that time. I felt this divine presence, and I just wanted to be close to this presence. And so that's how my inner guide came to me. And a series of mystical experiences happened. And then my guide said to me to come to India and be with him in physical form.
Mhm.
And so I was, my husband at the time and I sold everything we had and bought one-way tickets to India.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I went to see my guru. And that's a whole nother story, a lot of which I talk about in my book, and all the different experiences and the mystical things and miracles even that I experienced around my physical guru, and the sort of blending of energy. I really felt my physical guru had the same energy signature as my inner guru.
Okay.
It was very interesting that, it's like all beings, all divine beings are, and our own self and everything is part of one integral whole. To me, there's only one guru, and that is Brahma. That is the infinite divine essence of all that is. That is the true guru. And a physical person can embody that. A subtle presence can embody that. And it can come in lots of different flavors, like different flavor ice creams, right? But it is the one eternal one that embodies the truth and the love and the beauty of the divine. And I found that in a particular flavor, I would say, like chocolate as opposed to vanilla. I found it in a particular flavor in my physical guru, Shrii Shrii Anandamurti, when I was in India, and in my subtle guru, who this guiding divine presence who came to me and gave me his name as Baba.
Mhm.
And it was definitely a masculine vibration to the inner presence. I knew it was male, but it even when I felt it as a child, it was a masculine vibration. It was interesting. And so that is the particular form that the divine presence came to me and has guided me and taught me and comforted me over the years. But through that teaching, I have come to know that is one form of eternal being, and that presence has many forms.
Mhm.
But the essence of what is divine is beyond form. It is in form, and it is eternal. It's always the same.
Mhm. And yeah, I understand that totally. So so many things I want to ask you from that, but when you actually went to India and you met Shrii Shrii Anandamurti Baba, how was that? How did you have a recollection or a knowing when you met him? How did it feel when you first laid eyes on him?
It was terrible.
Oh,
It was terrible. So my husband and I got to India, and we settled in this ashram, and then we were going to darshan to see our guru. And the first thing that happens is we get in there and they say, oh, the men sit over here and the women sit on the side over here. And I went, what? So that was my first distress, is that, what? I have to go sit on the side. I can't even sit in front. And so I went over with the ladies section and sat on the side, because it was Patna. It was traditional India. Patna is the capital of Bihar. It was traditional India, very traditional at that point. There was no refrigeration, no TV, no radio, no, basically very, very few cars. It was mostly rickshaws and ox carts and mud streets, and it was authentic India of the day. And men and women had the relationship of men and women was very different than in Western culture. And so I entered traditional India, and suddenly I was shuffled over to the side, and that was the first distress. And then Baba came. And the first thing that happened to me, he gave darshan, which is sight of the guru. So it's basically, he gives a talk twice a day. And what happened the first week or two is that everything you wouldn't want to think in front of a being who knows all your thoughts would rise up to the surface in my mind. It was terrible. It was an awful experience. I went, oh my God.
Why am I thinking that?
Yeah, exactly. Why am I thinking that? I felt like it was just being drawn out of me, So that was my first experience. So that was not particularly exciting.
No.
And so I'm going, where am I? I'm in this place that's totally sexist, and I have to sit over on the side, and I feel completely ignored, and I'm having all these terrible thoughts, and it was miserable. But then after a few weeks, it began to change, and I began to feel this bliss. But what happened, so I sat over on the side. So Baba's like his choki, which is this like kind of platform bed kind of thing that people sit on. And then everyone else just sits on the floor. There were no chairs, no back jacks, no chairs. Fortunately, I was young. I was in my early 20s. So
Yeah.
I don't think it'd be the same now. And the men sat in front, and the women sat over to the side here. So he's facing the front, and he does this namaskar when he's leaving like this. And he would come to me and he would do like this. And I go, because my inner Baba was telling me, you have to do something about this situation. And I wasn't doing anything about it because I can't follow that inner guidance. What if it's wrong? And I'm just, a stranger here. And so physical Baba would go like this when he was, and I knew that meant that I was clearly doing something wrong. And I knew that what it was I was not following him internally, telling me I had to do something about the sexist situation.
So what did you do?
So I ended up, this whole drama took place over a period of weeks. And first, I talked with all the other European and American people staying at the ashram. There were a bunch of us. And we all got together, and, nobody liked the situation in India, the classical Indian situation. So we decided, I sort of stirred up trouble, I would say. And we decided, because I was being guided to do that. And so we decided that we were going to, all the men were going to sit over on the women's side and protest. And we were stand up. And there's this kirtan dance, which is a part of, was introduced by Chaitanya Prabhu in the Middle Ages as a part of the Bhakti Yoga movement, where people dance kirtan. Hare Krishnas do it.
Yeah.
You've probably seen the Hare Krishna, but it's a part of Bhakti Yoga. And so dancing kirtan and singing a chant Bhavanam Kevalam was part of what we did. And so, but women were not allowed to stand up and dance, only men. It was traditional India. Women sat on the side quietly and were ignored, and frankly, the culture was one that in the presence of men, women wore their sari over their head and looked down, and it was considered sexually provocative to look at a man directly. It was very, I kind of thought at times that the cows had more privileges than the women. Women were supposed to stay at home and not even go out unless accompanied by their husband or their father, or maybe their brother.
Yeah.
So it was traditional India. It had been that way for a long time, and India has changed completely, but at that time it was classic India. And so, but Baba was essentially guiding me to stir things up. So all the men came over and sat on the women's side. And then I could tell that the Indian women were disturbed because they're part of that culture. That's their reality. The men were college educated, the women were illiterate. It was the time in India. And here all these Western men came and sat with them, and they were uncomfortable. And so we all stood up and did kirtan. And then Baba was facing forward, and he came and he namaskared like this around our section. And as he did, this wave came out and we all fell on the floor.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, so I kind of went back to the drawing board, realizing that was not the
Scratch one.
So, and I got from my inner Baba that we were disturbing the Indian ladies, and he didn't like that. The point was to change, not to do harm to them who were, in their own cultural context. And he didn't like that we disturbed them. That's what I got from my inner Baba. And so then the next thing that happened is it was my habit to meditate for a couple of hours before Baba came in to give his talk in front of his seat, his choki, this platform bed. And I'd have very deep meditation. And so Baba came in, and he didn't come in. Before he came in, they would always say, Didi, you must move. And there was a guard there, a facilitator who would insist that we move, and we'd have to move to the other side. And so the next thing that happened after the one didn't work but it was blissful because we sort of had this miracle happen, when he did knock us all down. Then there was this blissful feeling like, whoa, but then it was also a message that, no, this isn't right. But then I'm sitting in front, and Baba says, don't move. And they said, Didi, you must move. Baba's saying, don't move, keep meditating. And these men are getting really upset because Baba's going to come in soon, and they're like huddled around me saying, Didi, you must move, you must move. Of course, they can't touch me because, in India, you don't do that, but they were getting really angry and really upset. And Baba's saying, just stay, don't move, don't move. And then these guys are just getting to the point of exploding. And then suddenly Baba's coming in the door, and they all have to run and sit down. And I'm sitting right in front of Baba, right directly in front, in the first row, right in front of where he sits. And the next day, the central office announced that that would be where where the Western women would have a section of half of the front in front of Baba.
Wow.
So it changed.
Yeah.
He wanted it changed, but without some reason for it to change, some disturbance, there couldn't be a change. And so that was the guidance I got within. And after that, I just felt immense bliss whenever Baba would come in the room and talk. I would just be lost in divine bliss. You know, I didn't even hear much of it, what he would say. You know, I was just in a deep state of of bliss, samadhi, when Baba would come and talk. And I felt a shower of bliss from him. And yeah, so that's kind of how it started, and it just got deeper.
You start as the little rebel.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Shaking things up.
Yeah. But I wouldn't have done it except for the inner guidance, you know.
Yeah. One thing I want to ask, because you make it very clear that you're not channeling, that this is this presence with you. So can you explain to us what the difference would be for people that don't understand, but what's the difference between somebody channeling and what you are experiencing?
Well, I feel that when you experience the presence of divine presence, it's coming from Shrii Shrii Anandamurti as a physical man was embodying not only his personality as a being, but something greater, something that didn't originate in that body-mind complex, something found. And my inner guru, I feel, is also an embodiment. I view him like a doorway that opens to infinity, you know, and behind that form, there's infinity. That's why my book is Into the Heart of the Infinite, right? It's behind that door of form, which is the Bhakti Yoga amnivocal form that you can relate to. But behind that is essence, is infinity, is the one. And so, yeah, I don't think we channel the one. I think the one graces us with a flow that comes through. To me, channeling, and it may be incorrect, I think channeling is wonderful. And I think a lot of people channel very high levels of consciousness, but they're perceiving it as an entity, entity that they're channeling. I don't feel that I'm channeling an entity. I feel that I'm connecting to the one. And the one has a congenial form for me, Baba, right? But it's the one.
I understand. So I know this is something that you struggled with, and I'd like to hear directly from you your sort of take on it, your doubt of how can this be happening to me, and how did you sort of get your head around it, really, that this infinite being is here talking to you, coming through you. How did you know it was real? I know you had the feeling, so you had the feeling of bliss, but how long did it take you to tell people? It must have been quite a tricky one, I feel.
It was, because, you know, this was a long time ago now. And in those days, there wasn't much, at least here, there wasn't much understanding of these kind of things. And, you know, channeling even wasn't a thing that, you know, that's become popular since then. But people didn't have connection, you know. Only thing, when I was at Southern Illinois University in my early 20s, I had never heard of anything except people being schizophrenic, you know? And so I was frightened by these experiences, but I was also tremendously in love. And so I had the combination, and I was having profound mystical experiences. So I was following something at what I realized, and I was afraid would be the cost of my sanity. And I would go into when Baba would feel close and I would feel the love, then none of that mattered because I was really in this divine presence. But then when that presence would get a little further from me, then I'd go into, oh my God, I'm crazy, you know, I'm going crazy. I'm listening to inner voices, and only crazy people do that. And you know, I had a lot of doubt, a lot of struggle, and so I went between these two. But when I went to India, it's all much more acceptable in Indian culture. When I read the Bhagavad Gita and I took the course on Indian uh, uh, mysticism, you know, on yogic mysticism,
Mhm.
then I really that gave me a lot of confidence. And when I went to India, it's a different culture that doesn't have that same norm that we had, and so I didn't feel as weird.
And so
And
when you say you were at college, were you studying psychology then?
no, I was an art major then.
Right, okay. So when did
Yeah,
the psychology come in?
it came in much later. I wanted to talk a little bit more about how the doubt thing came
Yeah,
later on,
please do. Please do.
and then I'll go, maybe can
Sure.
go into psychology. But um, so then I had a lot of experiences. I went to India. I had years and years of raising a family, going back to school, getting my PhD in psychology. And the reason I did it is I wanted to be able to work using this spiritual knowledge and spiritual experience that I had. I wanted to be able to share it with people. And I thought that transpersonal psychology would be a way to do that. And so I went back to school, got my PhD, you know, had two wonderful boys, and, you know, led a family life. My medication went from 10 hours a day to maybe a half hour if I was
Yeah.
lucky.
Yeah.
Maybe not, you know. And um, and then I went through a long 20 years or more of, you know, being grounded in the world, seeing lots of different gurus, keeping up spiritual stuff, but grounding in the world. And I began, then again, I began to have a lot of mystical experiences after I got my license. A period happened where all this inner presence began to be more prominent. I began to meditate every spare moment. And I felt this divine presence much stronger. And I began to have all these experiences, feeling this energy rising up, and, you know, openings in the palms of my hands and the soles of my feet, and white light, and the chakras opening, and all different types of experiences began to happen. And I felt a deep communion with Baba that was deepening. And then in that, I felt that I felt that Baba as a physical person was going to leave this world. My physical guru I could feel that in there, that he was going to be leaving the world. And then I had the experience that I went to, he passed out of his body. I was having these mystical experiences. He was telling me that something was going to happen, that there was this passing of a flame. Lots of different images were coming, but that there was something going on. And then I went to India for his cremation called Maetrayii-Ma. And in that cremation, I had this experience, this very powerful spiritual experiences during that time before the cremation, when I went to see the body and when I went to be there and very deep, deep meditation. And Baba basically said to me that he was passing this Guru Shakti onto me. And I had first of all, I didn't know what the term meant. And then, but I had the feeling that it was some sort of passage of something. And I freaked out. And that's where doubt really came strong. And I was grieving, deeply grieving the loss of this physical person, because I felt like the anchor of that divine energy was leaving the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And I also, and I felt like I had some past life connection, and why was I here without him? And then I felt, what is this Guru Shakti, passing the flame, the mantle? What is all this? You know, I said, I am a really ordinary person. He had a huge organization, lots of thousands of monks and nuns. I had nothing to do with it. I was not even active in it. So it's like, I'm not part of any of this. This doesn't, this is some delusion I'm having, And I convinced so I went home. I was really struggling with this. I convinced myself after a while that it was a delusion, because I was I was struggling with grief, and I was struggling with this. I'm an ordinary person. I'm just regular Western women. I'm not anybody special. How can this kind of thing can't happen to me? There's got to be somebody, this has got to be fantasy. And so my doubt was extremely strong at that point, which I'd always struggled with over the years, but now it was, and what I'd done is I'd kept my spiritual life under taps. I don't think hardly anybody knew that I had this inner guru relationship. I just didn't tell anybody. That's how I solved it. I was a very open person, except I didn't mention my spiritual life. And I was psychologically very open. I'll tell you about all my problems, but I wouldn't tell you about my mystical experiences or spiritual life or my inner Baba. I didn't share that with people. And there I was. He was saying this was a seed. This Shakti was in seed form, and it would grow and bear fruit. And I went, I don't see any proof of this. There's nothing in the objective world to tell me this is real. I finally lost it, And I was working as a psychologist in a developmental center, very, traditional work situation with, and there were, I think, 21 psychologists at that place. So it was, it was a big facility. And I had peers, and so I confided in one of my peers and said, I'm losing it here. And then she said, no, this is real. So I'm going, no. But I slowly, I went through a period of just, no, this isn't real. I've gotten off into some delusion. I'm just going to block it all out. And then I started having panic attacks, terrible panic attacks. It was terrible. And I went through 3 months of panic attacks. And then I finally said, okay, enough. I'm going to accept this. Whatever's happening, I just have to deal with it. And I have to accept that something's going on. And then over the next few years, this ability to, I would say, bring through this divine force grew. And I found myself giving talks and people recording them. And the talks didn't come and in a way, it's kind of like channeling because they didn't come from my rational mind. They weren't anything like I'd just have to trust. And that was the whole thing here, is to bring my spiritual life out into the surface was the big challenge for me, I think. So there is something in the process of spiritual transformation. And that was the struggle, and doubt and fear are part of the journey that I think most of us deal with,
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's the way it came out for me. And it's a real part of the journey. And I would encourage anybody, when you face your own doubts and your own fears, believe in spirit. Trust spirit, trust your own heart, trust the love inside of you, because love is always stronger than fear.
It is.
And that was what I learned, that love is stronger than fear, and that spiritual transformation is a real thing. And that when this began to happen, and my dharma, my path in life was to bring this through, and it wasn't from my rational mind. It's like it came from a higher mind, and this would sort of drop into my mind and words would just flow. And so I never knew what I would say from one moment to the next, and it would just become a flow of energy. And that went on for many years. In fact, I still give these talks I call them Baba talks. And
we have a podcast, don't you, and a YouTube channel, which I'll put in the show notes.
That's right. They're on the podcast and they're on the YouTube channel for anyone who wants to see them. And my other books, I have one, Living Love, The Yoga of Yama, which I gathered all the talks that had flowed through on Yama, and I made them into a book. I edited them to be relatable to a book and put them in a book. I have another one on Dharma.
And you've done 6 books, haven't you?
Yeah, I've done quite a few.
Yeah.
These are the most edited ones, the one on Dharma for Awakening and Social Change, and the one on Living Love, The Yoga of Yama. But all these books are this flow of knowledge that comes through, and from Baba. But I have to say, I don't see Baba as a person. I see Baba as a doorway. It's a form behind which there is infinity, and through which channels this love of the infinite for living beings, and comes into words as it drops through my mind.
It's such an amazing privilege.
Yeah, and it's grace. That's what I really feel. It's grace.
Yeah.
And I feel the teachings that come from grace. And so the books, the podcast, the YouTube are my effort to just share that with people. That grace, it's for everyone. And that's what happened, that Guru Shakti that I so doubted was really this flow. And it was there, but it took a few years for it to fully manifest, just like he said it would. And I had to go through my doubt and my fear and then finally my acceptance.
Yeah,
and
surrender and acceptance, I suppose, is the big thing, isn't it? And particularly when you've kept your spiritual life so quiet over the years, and then all of a sudden you're expected to be, here you go.
Out there, yes, it was.
Be like, where did this come from?
Exactly. It's very challenging, But I think that so many of us in our own spiritual journey and our story, we have our own version of that. We have our own version of doubt and fear and not trusting ourselves, not trusting spirit, and maybe not being so open about all of this internal work that we're doing with spirit, right? In whatever manifest way it is coming. And then there comes a point where you have to sort of integrate the inner and the outer.
What tips could you give to somebody for that?
Continue meditation. Meditation is really the doorway, and then trust your own intuition, trust your own divine connection, trust the love that is there, that trust that there is within you an ocean of love, a deep truth, and a deep peace, which is your own true nature. And trust that. Trust how it comes to you. Look for how it shows up for you, because each one of us, it'll be different.
Yeah.
And meditate, because meditation is really deep meditation, where you meditate. It's good to start out with the body scanning and those types of meditations, but there comes a time when it's important to meditate on the God within. Meditate on divine love, meditate on infinite peace, meditate on divine presence. You might even see a form of the divine that is particularly resonant for you. And know that that presence, it is infinite being, and it is your essence. It's who you are. It's what everything is, and I think trusting that, and trusting your own spirit, trusting your own intuition, rather than trusting fear and doubt.
I think this is the battle at the moment, as I see it, and I don't like using that word battle, but is between all this on social media, news, mainstream media. We're all being, in my opinion, sort of encouraged to divorce from ourselves, to let the fear come in, and then we give in to a higher, as in the media, what they want us to understand. And I'm not a conspiracist, and that sounds like I am, but I'm really not. But I think that, to me, that's the massive thing at the minute, where you see people where everything, any, like the younger generation, like in the 20s, anything they want to know, it's straight onto the phones. And yes, there's an amazing source of information that they can find there, but there's no trust in anything anymore, because it's in that. The answer they look for is in that. It's not in themselves. And I think that's quite a hard thing for, I mean, I'm in my 50s, and that's been my life's mission, to learn to trust myself, because it is a hard one. Like you say, there's the self-doubt, and we all go through it. But I do think about the ones in the 20s and think, how are they ever going to trust? There are some that are, but there are some that, there's a real black and white. So the ones that aren't, how are they ever going to find their way home? How are they ever going to feel that love? How are they ever going to experience it?
I think it's hard for us of an older generation to trust the universe. Things are changing, and I feel that I can't really see and judge that relationship, because that's not my, I didn't grow up that way. Certainly I'm on my phone and all the stuff like everybody else, but for younger people who that's been how they grew up, then, and that's what they know. I don't know. Maybe there's something transcendent in that if you go far enough, and if you go deep enough, So if whatever age you are, if you embrace time for meditation, time to quiet the mind, time to contemplate your inner nature, and time to connect with your eternal being, then whatever those things are, they become you don't externalize as much. You have your own inner journey, and then you can learn to listen to your own intuition, as well as then maybe all of this can be integrated, because ultimately everything is within the one. Everything is in eternal, infinite being. A blade of grass, I'm looking at a beautiful plant. The plant is within the leaves of the plant are, everything has its cosmic source. Everything is part of that source. If we have eyes to see and ears to hear, a bird singing, a brook running, everything can speak to us, and even in technology, scientists find their connection to spirit by going so deep. What are the Einsteins of the world doing? They're going so deep. And if you see how a lot of the scientific discoveries have come, they've come in dreams, they've come in aha moments of intuition.
Inspiration.
Concentrate, you concentrate, and then aha, right? You connect with the divine and you get the download.
I love that.
And,
Yes.
you
Yeah,
know,
that's so true.
and so it's hard to say where technology is going. Technology is a transition. It's part of the infinite too. And so I don't know where it's all going, and how people will find their way. But I do know that spirit is strong and the love within us is strong, and that everyone who wants to, who feels a calling to, who will find their way, who's meant to find their way, and it will find their way. And the forms may be forms that are unusual to you and I. It's hard to know.
It is. No, it really is. Maetreyii-Ma, I've absolutely loved chatting to you. I've been enthralled by what we're talking about, everything, and I hope everybody else will. Well, I know everybody else will be too. I'm going to put all your details in the show notes below. So there's lots of ways that you can connect with Maetreyii-Ma. There's, like we've said, there's YouTube channels, there's the podcast, there's 3 websites I'll put the details of. There's the books, there's a whole host of information out there that you're just going to love. So thank you so much for joining me. I'm so grateful that you've taken the time out. I really, truly am.
Oh, it's been wonderful to be with you.
It really has been truly wonderful. I think we've been very blessed to have you, and I really do appreciate it. And that's it for me for now, and I will be back again soon with another amazing guest. Thank you for joining us. Bye.